Hello and welcome to episode 21 of the Carlson Cards podcast. Today we have a great interview with someone who you'd probably call a player collector. However, he collects a favorite player across 4 major sports. So that led to a great discussion today where we got to touch on a little bit of baseball, basketball, football, and even some wrestling. I learned a ton. I hope you all do as well. And as you're probably aware, I took a week off last week. Nice chance to just refresh. My wife and I did some traveling. I got to stand up in a wedding in Milwaukee. The reason I share that was because it was really neat being there and seeing the Damian Lillard posters and signs all over the city already, with that trade having just taken place this past week. I'm really excited to see how the Bucks do this year. That'll be interesting with him on the team. Thanks so much for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Let's get over to the conversation. Hello and welcome to episode 21 of the Carlson Cards podcast. We're joined today by my friend Jacob, who goes by @JRL Cards, a guy that I've talked to for a long time. Originally, I connected with him because he does collect Jordy Nelson, who's a Packer favorite of mine. But in reality, his collection is very vast and broad amongst many sports. So I felt like there's a really cool opportunity to get someone on who knows a lot about a lot of different stuff. So I thought it'd be fun to talk, maybe even patches, autos, shiny cards, everything across many different sports. So it should be a really, really fun conversation. And again, thank you, Jacob, for joining here today. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, man. Like you said, we've kind of talked back and forth for quite a while, and I'm a fan of the podcast and hop on YouTube every once in a while just to leave a comment. So I appreciate you having me on.
Yeah, I've been enjoying. I've seen you've been putting some PSA reveals on there too. I've really been enjoying those. What was the inspiration to share them online, just to kind of share it with others so they can see kind of the kind of cards you're grading and stuff like that?
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple reasons there. The first one is that I've been a lurker on YouTube for a long time. And it started feeling a little odd posting quite a bit on Instagram and getting quite a few followers on Instagram, and then being someone who just lurked on YouTube and would occasionally, I always like videos because I feel like that's the least I could do to support a channel, but I didn't and still don't comment a lot. And then I also felt it was weird where it's like, I might interact with this person on Instagram quite a bit, but do they know that it's me on YouTube because it was a personal YouTube? And it's like, well, of course they don't. So that just makes an odd dynamic. So I created a JRL Cards YouTube, and then figured, well, when I do that, I can also use it for kind of archival historical purposes for what was I thinking, what mail was I getting in, what PSA submissions was I getting back. So it kind of was able to capture both of those things and just make it feel less awkward for me interacting with people in both areas.
Yeah, definitely. And you can always go back and say, why did I get a 6 on this AJ Green, that kind of thing. You got to figure it out. So I was wondering if we could start just for those who maybe don't know you, a quick maybe personal background, a little bit about yourself, just people can relate, maybe where you're from, that sort of thing. What do you do for work? And then maybe you could tie that in towards the end there, then on how do cards fit into this whole thing? Maybe how did you start? What got you back if you left for a little while and came back? I'd love to hear more about yourself.
Yeah, sure. My story is generally the same as a lot of people who came back in kind of during the pandemic, but I collected a lot as a kid. I was born in the late 80s, and I have a brother who's just shy of 2 years younger than me. And we were, pretty active kids, played sports, played Little League, and growing up, my dad was a collector. He was kind of a degenerate pack ripper. Basically, he'd buy complete sets, and he'd create sets and binders. And that was around, the time when I was, really little, that I can't remember that he started that in '89, and he was chasing for, the Upper Deck Griffey, and will tell you to this day that he never actually pulled one from a pack. But so growing up, it was always kind of the thing is, we were always asking for cards. We'd get packs of cards. We'd go to the card shop. Other people who we played baseball with in Little League, it seemed like everybody at that time, which would have been, probably 94 to 99 is when we were the most into it. Everybody I knew had boxes of cards. And my dad and my mom got really into Little League, and we're like president and vice president or whatever of the Little League in our town. And so for things like fundraisers, they do like a carnival. And one of the things my dad would do is like all the base cards, which in the early to mid 90s, it's pretty much all base cards, right? He'd package them up and we'd have this big carnival. And so that's how he would kind of get rid of kind of the junk base that he didn't want. And so it just all kind of fed on itself, right? We're playing baseball, our friends collect baseball cards, we're trading, our dad's kind of into it. He's using them as prizes for the carnival. So we got really into it. And lucky enough, that was the time period where card shops were a big boom. I grew up in a really small town. I'm from the Pacific Northwest, really small town in Oregon. And right across the river is Washington, and there's two towns right there that combined have like 30 or 40,000 people, and there were like 3 or 4 card shops growing up, like in that, and it's kind of crazy, one card shop per 10,000 people or whatever is like insane. But we would go to them all the time, and we were not singles buyers, we were pack buyers, and that was a lot of, collector's choice, which was like $1 or $1.50 a pack, at that time. I remember, there were packs that were $2, $3, $4, and it's like, well, we could buy 3 or 4 packs of collector's choice, or we could buy 1 pack of, whatever else for, 4 or 5 cards for $4. And, we had a lot of kind of loose singles that went into like the carnival packs or whatever. And then we had our 2 and 3 row binders that we had all of our top loaded cards, and then we would complete little sets. So like the Star Quest, I think it's 98 maybe, is the one I think of a lot, which has a single, double, triple, and home run. It might not be 98, but it's 98 or 99. And that's one that we would open those packs a ton. I had a couple of the little like 2x2 binders full of the singles. I had like complete sets of the singles, several of them, and I think I had a complete set of the doubles, and then I had seen like 2 of the triples. And that just goes to show you, like back then, how difficult it was. Like we weren't on eBay. Like I didn't know what was happening in a neighboring state. It's now everything's at your fingertips. I can buy any of those cards, a lot of them for like $1. But to us, it was like a big deal. And so, as we got a little older, we mostly stopped collecting sports cards. And, Magic the Gathering was big, Pokemon was big, Yu-Gi-Oh was big, did a little bit of that. And then eventually, kind of as I went off to college, stopped collecting completely. And at that point, we gave a bunch of our cards away to friends of the family. Just kind of like, we don't need these anymore, here you go. There's not really any value here. Right? You can kind of do me a favor by taking them out, have to move them to college or do anything like that. So got rid of probably 99% of them there, just had a handful of cards. And, didn't really collect anything through college, played Magic and some other collectible card games a little bit. And then it's when I kind of came back from college, I kind of got into the FIRE movement a little bit that you've talked about.
Oh,
where
the financial independence, retire early, that kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. Where, I was too early to really worry about that, but I was very much about like paying down debt, like spending less than I made. And that was, during the Great Recession. And so like there wasn't a lot of money to be made coming right out of college with that. And so it was really scarce just trying to do life stuff, saving up, paying off student loans, like that sort of thing. And it wasn't until I was actually listening to a Ringer podcast. I'm a big fan of like all the Bill Simmons stuff, right? And I was listening to the Mismatch, and they were talking about sports cards. I think it was Chris Vernon who was talking about sports cards. He was a kid. I think he goes to the National and stuff. But he was talking about, oh, sports cards are back. Sports cards are cool. Like, all this stuff. And, I've got a kid, he was young, really young at the time. And I think he must have been 2 or 3 at the time. And, starting to really hit the nostalgia, right? I'm in my mid to late 30s now. And so it's one of those things that I just started like reminiscing about like everything I just told you, right? Like growing up and playing t-ball and collecting cards with my brother and all this stuff. And so I got the itch a little bit, and started it was probably October, November of 2020 was when I got back in it. When I look at my Instagram, that's kind of when I think the first posts were, and reached out to my brother and my dad and kind of got them back into it a little bit as well. I'm the most in it. I've kind of jumped back with both feet, and it's kind of where we are today. I mean, there's been a lot since then about my collection changing and how I'm spending my money and all that, but that's kind of where I started from and how I kind of got to back into collecting.
So when you came back in, it sounds like you mentioned, the nostalgia originally was the pack opening, but also the collecting. Did you originally, when you got back in like 2020, when again you said the nostalgia was hitting, did you dive right into packs again, or did you stick with singles this time around? Maybe now knowing you had a little more financial savviness, was that part of it if it was singles?
Um, so not at the beginning, but it changed real quick. So when I came back in, it was really just like opening the packs of cards. I bought a bunch of blasters and hangers of would have been 2020 tops, right? Just opening baseball cards and I putting together sets. I have the complete Series 1, Series 2, and update from that just because I was opening so many packs and opening them with my son and letting him pick, some cards and that sort of thing. And then it got to the point where, that started to be when you couldn't find anything
Yeah.
in stores, right? But I was buying, blasters of Absolute on eBay for $45 a piece or whatever, right? Like making a lot of bad decisions because I was just so into the nostalgia and jumping back in and, for better or worse, like I had the disposable income, right? And so it's one of those things that's really been kind of the focus of my collecting is like, just because I can doesn't mean I should do it. And that's where I think a lot of people, some people get themselves into a lot of trouble, right? And then some people less so. But our ability to spend money, especially, you're quite a bit younger than I am, I think. But
About to
um,
be 26.
yeah. So you're about 10 years younger than me. That's what I thought. Um, we have disposable income. This is fun, but should we be spending all that money on it, right? And for each person, like everybody has their own kind of financial situation, family situation, right? You have to figure that out on your own. And some people have longer and shorter journeys. I'm still kind of trying to figure that out for myself, right? What I feel comfortable with. But it didn't take me that long to decide that as much fun as I was having opening those packs, when I was getting nothing and then turning around and buying the item on eBay that I wanted for half as much as I spent opening those packs, that okay, well that's fun. That can be done on occasion. So I do that with my kids now. I'll open up packs of cards with them. But the main focus of my hobby is buying the singles.
Awesome. So when it comes to singles collecting, singles collecting. That sounds
Sounds
like
odd,
something
but
inappropriate. Singles collecting. I'm gonna move over to some of the photos you gave me, and I think this is a good way to segue into a lot of the conversations that I had posed to you as thought starters here. One of
yeah.
the first was that you had provided me. I believe this is exquisite of a player again that's near and dear to my heart, and interestingly enough, is a big part of your collection. So I'd love to hear how this collection in front of me started and just in general, maybe the love for the player and that sort of thing.
Yeah. So my collection really, I think I can bifurcate it, right? I have, it's all nostalgia, but there are aspects of my collection that are pure nostalgia. I think of Frank Thomas, Sean Kemp, Ripken, like those are people that I collected as a kid, and now I can buy awesome cards of them. And I know we'll talk about them some later. And then there's kind of my current sports loves, right? Like I'm a Mariners fan, I'm a Packers fan, I'm a Sonics fan when they eventually come back. And so, I collect some active players. Jordy kind of is in the middle there. It's nostalgic because he came out in '08. He was part of the Super Bowl. He's been retired since 18. He hasn't played with the Packers since 17. So there's some time there, right? And he was also one of the players that when I started playing fantasy football, which isn't something that I had mentioned in kind of my hobby story, but is something that got me really back into sports watching, which I hadn't done for most of high school and college. I had drafted him early in one of my first fantasy leagues, and it was a keeper league, and I kept him. And so it's one of those things where, there are a lot of Packers players that I like and that, I could have, really loved, but like there's Jordy that I had from early in his career. I'm watching him do so well. I'm watching him get injured, and like that's heartbreaking, but it also gives you the like what if, and then those were also a lot of years where Rodgers was getting significantly injured, missing a lot of time. And so there's how good of a player he was, what he meant to the Packers, but then there's also all these like what ifs. What if they had both been healthy? Like, what if Jordy had remained healthy? Those sorts of things. And he played nearly his entire career with the Packers. He had the 1 year that I try not to think about in Oakland, and that I don't collect. But really, when I think of the Packers, like I think of Jordy, and it also happens to work out that with him being an '08 rookie, you get exquisites, which I love, which is why it's only exquisites here, right? My Jordy collection is huge, but the exquisite rookies like just really have like a place in my heart, which is why I don't mind having multiples.
So when you look for this set and you started hunting and to this day, what do you typically target? How do you isolate like what is a cool card specifically from these exquisite runs or this year specifically? How do you decide what you're going after? Is it really based off the patch, the numbering, whether you like the look of it? Like, could you run me through that mindset for yourself?
Yeah, at first it was anything I could get my hands on, which thankfully it's not like they come up all the time, so I wasn't able to get my hands on a ton. Now I'm a little bit more strict when it comes to what I'm purchasing. When it comes to the exquisites, like they pretty much all fall under my guidelines. Like they're pretty much all, if they're autos, they're all on-card autos. A lot of the patches are really nice, or even the ones that have multiple relic pieces, they're not all necessarily going to be great pieces, but a lot of them have patch breaks or different varieties in color. And Exquisite's just such a nice set that there's really nothing in '08 Exquisite that I don't like. So as they've come up, I haven't been able to purchase all of them, but I've been able to purchase a large amount of them. And it's really about like, what's my budget looking like at the moment? I kind of have buy prices since I've been purchasing so many of these, and I'm the buyer of probably 75%, if not more, of the exquisite Jordys that have sold over the past 3 years or so, that I kind of know how much they're worth. And on occasion, they'll sell for more than that, and I won't get them because someone else, it was probably the one that they had a chance to get. There's one case where I had let one go on purpose. I know who has the RPA that are the bottom 7 cards there. I know who has the 101, and he needed the out of 75 in order to complete his rainbow, the 101, the 75, and the 199. And I was talking to him, and he's like, "Man, you've grabbed like all of these." And I was like, "Hey, like, I hear you, brother. Like, the next one that comes up, like, I'm hands off."
I'll do you a solid. I'll do you a solid.
Exactly. And one came up not long after that, and I messaged him. I was like, "Hey, man, like, here's your chance. Like, I'm not even putting like a $5 bid on it, right? Like, it's all you." And he ended up getting it. Otherwise, as they come up, I'm snagging them. And not to jinx myself, and if there's another Packers collector or Jordy collector out there, I wish them the best of luck getting these. But I think there's 4 on eBay right now out of 75 that I have my eyes on, because I'm happy to add to double my out of 75s.
That's awesome. I appreciate you sharing. And just out of curiosity as well, are there any other players from this set that you kind of pair up with Jordy, or is it mostly just Jordy that you've stuck to for this year?
I've basically,
I know you collect other receivers. That's the only reason I asked.
Yeah, no, it's actually a good question. So I don't. I do. There are players that I like to pair quite a bit. I don't collect anybody else out of the '08 class, but this is the same class that like Joe Flacco's in, Matt Ryan is in. And then also Matt Forte, who's one of my brother's favorite players. So I kind of caveat, because I've actually purchased maybe 3 or 4 Forte exquisite cards that I've then traded to my brother. Just like, I'm the one who saw them. I thought they were a good deal. Like, hey, I'll just trade them to you. Like, you give me kind of whatever that's equal value. And so I have bought some Forte cards, but that's for his collection. I had no plans to really hold on to those.
I appreciate it. Jamal Charles too, I think, in that.
Yeah. No, great point. Yeah, Jamal Charles too.
Keep in mind. Oh, trying to think if there's any. Oh, Deshaun Jackson. I think that's another one.
Yeah, that sounds right.
I don't know any others though. It's
Jamal Charles. I was just going to say Jamal Charles is crazy inexpensive for the caliber of player he was. Jordy, I've really needed to kind of take a half step back because there's so many Packers fans, and for Packers fans, I mean, in both of our age brackets, right? Like he's one of the guys, and especially if you don't have the money for Rodgers, you know, you could spend, thousands of dollars for Rodgers or hundreds of dollars for Jordy. Now, you could spend hundreds of dollars for Jordy or tens of dollars for Randall Cobb.
Or fives of dollars for James Jones. Or
Exactly. Yeah. Donald Driver, James Jones. Like, there's a lot of Packers players who did great things who are extremely cheap in comparison.
Yeah. Awesome. Appreciate it. Super fun. We're going to talk more Jordy on your Mount Rushmore, I think, too. So
Yeah.
Some questions. So next slide I have here, this is another group photo you gave me. So if you could describe what we're looking at and maybe the importance here and why you wanted to share this set here.
Yeah. So this goes back to so what we're looking at is a bunch of Shawn Kemp inserts, and they're all, you'll notice, in Sonics jerseys. So, Shawn Kemp got around a bit in the back half of his career. And I really collect him in Sonics jerseys. I mean, because that's the team that I really rooted for. And I'm really looking for him in the 90s, in the kind of the mid 90s. These are the cards that when I was younger, I had a chance for in certain situations. In other situations, like I wasn't even able to buy the packs that these cards came out of, but I would see them in Beckett's. I would see them when we went to card shows, which we would do on occasion. And so these were like grails to me. I mean, I didn't even know, for instance, like you just had Nat Turner on, right? Which, talk about culture shock, like going from Nat Turner to me. But I didn't know what a PMG was when I was growing up, right? But like I knew what these cards were: the rave reviews, the hot shots, cut above, those sorts of, like, I knew what those were. They were obtainable, but not something that I was able to obtain.
Could you rattle them off going top left to down to the corner? So actually, I guess I'll put it this way. So we were talking before this interview. Fun fact, you have to pay for Microsoft Office Suite, PowerPoint or something. So my dad's family plan or whatever, I don't know what I'm connected to, ran out today. So Jacob was flexible and we're using images that you guys are going to see high quality images, but we're looking at as not, because I just am using what I have available until I can make a PowerPoint slide. But yeah, Jacob, if you could run through just so I'm aware too, could you just list all of the different ones from top left to the bottom right?
Yeah, so there's the Golden Touch, which I have in a SGC. There's the Cut Above, which is a CSG. There's the Big Man on Court, and then you go down to the Rave Review, the Hot Shots, and then the what's that one called? The Net. It's Netrageous. Yeah, Netrageous.
I've never seen that one. What's that one from? What's the story? Is Jordan not in that one? Is that maybe why I haven't seen it?
So it's metal.
Okay.
I assume that Jordan is in that one, but I'm not positive. It's a really cool looking. It's green. It's got like a shine to it. It's got a die cut, like an odd die cut edge to it. It's just kind of like a cool looking card. I mean, some of the 90s, I mean, kind of with all of these, right? The Golden Touch, I bought raw on eBay for, I think, $30. Which at the time they were going for 50 or 60. So I got this great deal and I got it in and I looked at it and I was like, oh my God, this looks perfect. And PSA it had their backlog at that point. So I sent it to SGC through a group subber with a handful of other cards, and I got that back, and it was a 9.5, and it was one of the first grading experiences that I had. And I was like, wow, like I was right. Like this looked great to me. It came back as a 9.5. It's got, this die cut around it. There are all these places where it could be kind of messed up, right? And it looked perfect. And of course, it's apparently not perfect, but a 9.5 is a great grade. So it's just beautiful cards. All these are beautiful cards. I like to flip through them, and my kids love them, just because they're just odd looking. They're really cool looking. Yeah.
They stop your, yeah, they're definitely like an eye catcher. Like when I saw these photos and again pulled this one up right now, it's immediately I want to learn more about them because again, not a big basketball collector, so I don't know a ton about them, but it's really neat seeing all the different colors. And I know the pack odds, even just learning some of that stuff would be really interesting for these. So you mentioned grading. One question I wanted to ask you, I know we talked at the beginning a little bit, like you've been sharing some grading reveals. I obviously do that if anyone's listening and has seen my YouTube channel. Part of what I like to share is grading reveals because for me, those are the videos I always really loved watching. It was really, really fun. I loved watching others get them back. And I know you have done a lot of grading. Are you pretty similar in the sense of at this point where like, you might send 20 or 30 cards, like 15 are for the PC, 15 you sell to pay for the other. Like, do you kind of do that thing as well, where you kind of fund a collection through grading a little bit?
Yeah, I actually, so I'm a little different than you in a certain aspect, but I also kind of stole that some for me, some for you a mindset when it comes to maybe my 3 or 4 most recent grading orders. I quite literally stole it from you because I was watching your reveals and I was like, that's a great idea to kind of get some of these back and be able to make up the grading costs or most of the grading costs by selling them, with the kind of the plan to sell them. For me, cards are entirely a hobby. My wife, so we have property, we have a couple horses. My wife is really into horses, and I think of cards as kind of like my horses, right? My dad, growing up, always joked about, like if you marry a woman who loves horses, like it'd be easier for you to just go in the backyard, dig a hole, and start tossing your money in it, which isn't wrong, but if you love a horse, then you're more than willing to go throw money in a hole, right? It's the same thing to me with the hobby. I really enjoy the hobby, and I am fine kind of tossing money into a hole. That said, there are certain times when you don't, need something in your collection anymore. And when that's the case, like I'm happy to sell it, just like with, any other hobby, with the horses, right? If there's something we don't need anymore, if they outgrow a bridle or something, like we're going to try and sell it. Not necessarily looking to make a profit on that, right? But I don't need this anymore. I should get rid of it, and I can use whatever money I get to put back into the thing that I love to do. And so it's much the same for me when it comes to the hobby, where I'm not buying things to sell them, but I sometimes buy things and then need to sell them for whatever reason. They just don't fit my collection anymore, or I could use money for something that I just purchased. And I take that a lot from Brett. I'm a big fan of Stacking Slabs, and he's very much like, if he needs to pivot his collection, if he's buying something big, sends his cards off to consignment. And if he loses money on it, well, he's got this cool card that's coming into his PC, and so it all kind of evens itself out in his head. And I try and do that a little bit. I try and get a little bit more ahead of it, where kind of like you, I'll post them, buy it now or best offer on eBay, and then if I do actually really need to move it, then I'll send it to consignment. But I think that you've mentioned this before, where a lot of the cards that we like, you can really, really, really get destroyed on auction. It's some of those things where, like, sometimes, okay, well, it will sell for $100 to $200 in a couple months on bin, or it will sell for $15 on auction. And there's literally that discrepancy because there's a couple really hardcore collectors, but if you don't catch them at the right time or whatever, that, you're just going to miss out on that. So when I've been sending in cards to get graded, what I've been doing is going through my collection and saying, well, if I need to move a handful of cards, like, what are the cards that I will move? And so I've started kind of narrowing down my focus, because like you mentioned, my PC is very broad. And so I figured I couldn't go both broad and deep, right? I can go broad and I can go narrow, and I can go shallow, or I can go narrow and deep, right? So I decided to go broad and shallow. So I continue to kind of cultivate my collection so that it's more shallow. And as I do that, I'll grab, 10, 15 cards. Okay, these are ones, they're of PC players. I bought them because I love them, but I'm probably going to get rid of them. So then I'll take those, and I'll take, 10 or 15 that are definitely staying in my collection. I'll send them out. And then when they come back, well, I know that there are 5 to 10 that I do plan on selling. I'll post them on Instagram and then later on eBay. But it's with trying to recoup as much as I can while trying to be smart about it. I don't love selling. I also don't want people to think I'm taking advantage. So if there's a raw card, there's always a lot of like, well, can you send me pictures or what's the grade or whatever? It's like,
Yeah.
and I don't want to do that because I sometimes feel like I'm underselling my own card. I'd rather say like, I'm selling it to you graded. It's an 8, 9, or 10, whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
Or I'm selling it to you raw. And if I'm selling it to you raw, I might be wrong, but I looked at it and I thought that it would an 8, 9, or 10. So, that gives you a lot of information. And it makes me feel better. Like I'm not taking advantage of someone who, in most cases, like it's like you, right? Where like we've talked quite a bit on Instagram, like we've DM'd, like we followed each other for a while. Like I would feel really bad if you thought that I took advantage of you. So this is a really easy way of really narrowing that so that the odds of you feeling that way are really small. On occasion, it means that I get a card back that I'm psyched as a 10 and I didn't look it up on eBay and the 10 sells for $35. And it's like, that's crazy. But that stuff kind of happens when you're not treating it as seriously as you would if you're treating it like a business.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that. That's a really good reminder too. I was trying to remember back, like, okay, I originally started grading cards, and I remember now a little bit of why as well, because off of what you're saying, because it was like you go to the card show and you'd buy cards for yourself, but then you see a good deal, you pick it up and then end up throwing it on eBay, whatever, for something that again doesn't fit the collection. But I recall now that you're saying when I first started, right, you would sell those raw cards and you'd get an alert a week later, return requested, and it's just so demoralizing. I think I don't put value in how much that really does benefit through the grading, but it's a nice part where you don't have to, like you said, you don't have to deal with the returns. It's really clear what at least the grading company thinks it is, and that sort of
Yeah,
thing.
it's a fringe benefit, right?
Yeah.
Like it's just another little reason to do it. Not the reason, but it's just another one to toss in there. And then I also there are certain parts of my collection that I want to be graded. As
Yep.
you can see by the screenshot you're showing, I don't necessarily care which grading company. I just like it to be graded because I have boxes of graded cards and I have boxes of magged cards and binders and stuff. And so sometimes I just want to get it in the collection, and then if I decide it's no longer part of the collection, well, now it's graded and I'm going to sell it, the way it is, right? And so it really just kind of depends on what part of the collection it is, like how many of those little reasons to grade are applicable to the individual card, and then it kind of goes into shipments or doesn't. But I've been trying to do 20 or 25 cards every month or month and a half or so. If PSA does a big special, then sometimes I'll kind of double up. I think you and I've talked about it before, where you can wait a period of time, so I can get one early in the month and then I can get one late in the month, but ship it like 2.5 weeks later, so that I get invoices in separate months, so that for my hobby budget, it's easier to deal with. So I play those games a little bit, but normally every like 4 to 6 weeks.
Yeah, that's funny. We did talk about that. Yeah, I like it because it keeps that that hobby net minimum. It gives you a better chance to keep attaining that. You know what I mean? Where you don't have to, like we've both talked about, and I think you brought up, Brett, which is a great point too. I think we all are similar, where you have the separate account, and if you want to get a big card, well, you have to make something happen, whether that is selling certain cards or, like you said, if you send the big reveal or order off, and you have maybe split it into two, so you don't get all the grading fees at once.
Yeah, exactly. If there's a difference between getting hit with $1,000 in one go versus $1,000 over 2-month period. When you're just talking about whether you've got a separate account, you don't have a separate account, it's a business, it's a hobby, whatever. It's just easier if it's kind of that smooth expense, right? That you can just kind of like set your watch to. Yeah, and it's just like bump. Oh well, but I sold a bunch of cards. Bump. Oh, I sold a bunch of cards, and it just makes it smoother if you can wait. There are
and then
reasons
after the 2 months, you get
out.
to look. Oh, now I have all these, and they're all graded, and I get to put them in my box that get to see the light of day at least a couple times a week.
Exactly. Yeah,
Awesome.
You get to go through the organization all over again.
So next couple are some honorable mentions before your Mount Rushmore. So let's jump through these quick. So I know I have 3 images up actually on this slide. If you could go through, probably start on the left, I would assume, and then like a reminder, like we just did, if you could just describe the card, because some people obviously just listen without the visual, that'd be great.
Yeah. So the first one on the left, I've got it here. This is a Frank Thomas auto out of 5-star. It's the rainbow foil out of 25. So this is the first Frank Thomas auto that I ever purchased. Which, I mean, if you're gonna buy one, that's quite the card to purchase. I found a steal of a deal. I honestly think it may have been a mistake, but it came in, looks great. Shout out on this one, actually. I'd like to give credit where it's due. Bill, the Hall of Fame collector, he's on YouTube. He's a big baseball card collector. I believe he's also on Instagram too, but I don't think he's very active there. He's a big 90s collector, and as his name says, he collects Hall of Famers. But he's also a set collector, and this is one of the sets that he's been working on getting all of the, I forget if he's trying to get all of them or if he's just trying to get the Hall of Famers out of it. But I saw, I forget which Hall of Famer he had showed, but he showed it on video from this set. And I was like, this is a gorgeous, just the way the rainbow foil, it just is a gorgeous card. And I immediately took a note, because I didn't know at that point in time, who was in it or whatever. It wasn't Frank Thomas that he was showing. So I took a note and I looked it up, and, sure enough, Frank Thomas is in it, Ripken's in it. And so, that was a card I knew I had to have, so I set up a save search for it and ended up snagging it for, gosh, I think $50 shipped, which just is not very much money. So I was really psyched about that. I've since bought another year of that same auto out of 25. Still looking for the Ripken. It's been on my my top 5 to purchase for this year, and I haven't seen one pop up. So that's a great card. The next one I have is that one right there. So that's the 2020 WWE Chrome Big Legends Superfractor of Kevin Nash. Kevin Nash is one of my other kind of big collections. I consider myself a Geordie super collector, although I'm kind of a medium-sized fish in a relatively big pond with that. With Kevin Nash, I think I'm a pretty big fish there. I have quite a few big cards. Superfractor, bought Ron, graded myself. It's just a beautiful card. One of the things about Kevin Nash, I watched wrestling, as a kid, kind of more of a WCW guy than a WWF, WWE guy. Kevin Nash was huge in WCW and NWO and the Wolfpack and all that. And I was a mark for him when I was little. And speaking of Brett, again, wrestling, something that I just started to kind of get back into a little bit. And he was talking about, wrestling cards and all the different stuff that he was kind of going after. And, it's just one of those things that you get a bunch of little seeds planted in your brain when it comes to the hobby. And some of them, grow and some of them don't. And that's one that kind of grew on me. And then as I was thinking about how I could be responsible and kind of get into that, I was thinking, well, nostalgia, Kevin Nash is big nostalgia for me. He's popular enough that he's in sets, but he's not so popular that he's in every set. So it became, one of those things that kind of made sense for me. And to be someone who's going after kind of higher end Kevin Nash cards, it's very doable. And so, that's one of a couple superfractors that I have, a couple 1-of-1s that I have. The other one, or one of the other ones that is right next to that in the picture is this Transcendent auto right here in his Diesel persona with the Diesel autograph. So that's the red 1-of-1 out of 2020 Transcendent. And that's one that I had been looking for a Transcendent auto for quite a while, for most of the year, quite a while for me. And there's a lot of them on eBay right now, out of 5s, out of 10s, out of 15s. I didn't like the price on them. It's one of those things I kind of make an offer, they'd counter offer, just couldn't get to anything. And I told myself that like this year, like I'm gonna get one sometime this year. If I have to bite the bullet, then I'll bite the bullet and I'll buy one of those and pay a little bit more than I wanted. And then this one came up and came up at bids, and I knew I had to have it. So I kind of preempted and sent some stuff off to consignment and tried not to buy too much other stuff that month while I was kind of waiting for it to go. And I paid more money than I would like to, but I ended up bringing it home. So that's one that's going to be staying in the collection for quite a while, but not my number one Kevin Nash card. So that's why it's an honorable mention.
Perfect. So I'm assuming, again, a similar example where we're going to talk the same player, but this time with the Mount Rushmore. So we have 4 cards in front. Same idea. If you could just share, like you just did, what we're looking at, that'd be amazing. If you want to start on the left, feel free.
Yeah. So we'll start on the left. It's an easy transition because it's also Kevin Nash. So this is the Topps Chrome from 2014. It's his gold refractor. So these are out of 50. Yeah, those are out of 50. Bought it raw on eBay, and it gemmed for me. So it's one of those perfect things, right? Where the 2014 Chrome set is a big deal for wrestling collectors. It's one that I had my eye out for since early on in my like Kevin Nash collecting days, and it just doesn't come up. And when it finally did, it's just one of those like gotta have it's, right? Like if there's this is number one for me right now, which is why it's on the Mount Rushmore. But even if it wasn't, like even if I get another card that somehow surpasses it, like this is one that's staying in the collection. It's just one of those things where I can't see collecting Kevin Nash and getting rid of this card. It would be really difficult for me to do that. And it's graded a 10, which is awesome. It's a gold refractor, which you and I are both kind of gold refractor simps. And so it really just kind of like fits that and fits perfectly. And any other wrestling collector that I show this to, like it's like, oh yeah, like I know exactly what that is. Now they also know what the Transcendent Auto is, right? But like this is kind of an iconic card for me. And like I said, Kevin Nash isn't in a ton of sets, and so for him especially, I would say this is kind of would be on any Kevin Nash collector's list of cards to get.
Is 2014 Chrome, is this kind of, I mean, from what I remember of the years I've seen of wrestling cards, this is like the first mainstream set that's kind of a shiny, like with refractors, that kind of thing? Or was there anything prior that comes to mind?
So I think that this is one of those things that depends who you ask.
Mm-hmm.
I would say yes. And for Kevin Nash, the answer is yes. There's also, I think it's 06, there's a Heritage Chrome.
Oh, okay.
And I think that it's one of those like, what's Mickey Mantle's rookie card, sort of things where like there are people who are who would very much argue on either side of that. But Kevin Nash isn't in that set. So for me, it's pretty simple if we're just talking about the scope of Kevin Nash. But I do, if we're just talking about wrestling cards in general, which I don't have a wide wrestling collection, right? I'm only collecting Kevin Nash. That is a set that I think it's 06 Heritage is a set that kind of comes up when people talk about like refractors, first refractors, that sort of thing.
Awesome. Appreciate you sharing. The second card, I'm literally, I was sitting here obviously looking at it and I'm thinking, man, I really got to get one of these at some point. Cause I know this isn't a 1 of 1. I'm pretty sure this isn't, but it looks like it is, which is really, really cool about it.
Yeah. So this is a hard one for me. So I'll talk about it.
And maybe it isn't a 1 of 1, right?
It is not a 1 of 1.
Okay, I thought it was. Okay, good. I was like, that's so offensive if I'm saying his 1 of 1 is not a 1 of 1, but it totally is.
But it's a superfractor auto, mm-hmm. which is why you would say it looks like a 1 of 1, right? Because it is a superfractor. So this is 08 Topps Chrome, so it's a rookie auto superfractor in a PSA 10.
For Jordy Nelson, obviously.
Of Jordy Nelson. Yep. Of knowledge, so the last time I looked, it was a Pop 3. Mm-hmm. I have one of them. This is I've had this one since March, I think late March of 2022. This is one of the only cards that I have like a story about. I worked from home during the pandemic. At the time, my daughter was really young, was in the room I'm in now. My office was her bedroom. So my office was in my bedroom. And so this was a PWCC auction. So those start at 7 o'clock. It used to be that you had to pre-bid. You had to be one of the bidders before the deadline in order to do the bidding kind of post 7 o'clock. So it was a Sunday night. So I worked the next day. My wife was in bed, a couple feet away from me because my desk was right there next to the bed. She's asleep. It's like 8 o'clock. I've gone back and forth on this card with a guy. I bid a couple dollars more, whatever the increment was. The 5-minute clock, gets down. It relists, or it stays listed because one of us had bid, and we went back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And gosh, it must have been, it was past 8 o'clock, but it wasn't like it was midnight, right? Because these are only 5-minute increments. But for whatever reason, I was tired. I wanted to go to sleep. And my wife was starting to get a little upset. Like, she's pretty understanding, all things considered, with how much time.
I've been there.
Yeah, with how much time I spend around these cards and how much money I spend around these cards. She also gets to spend money on like the stuff that she likes, right? But I don't. The stuff that she spends her money on doesn't take as much of my life as my card spending takes of her life, right? So she's like, "Are you coming to bed? Like, what's going on here?" And I was like, "I'm gonna put one more bid. And if this guy wants it that bad, then like he wants it that bad." So I put one more bid, and that was the winning bid. And kind of the rest is history. So when I do my mail days, which I didn't do a mail day on this one, but when I do my mail days, I talk about dollars, just because I think that it's good for people to understand kind of how much people are spending and just that sort of thing. And so I don't mind saying I paid just shy of $800 for this card, which at that time was the second most I'd ever spent. And I think at this time is still like the second or third most I've ever spent on a card. I'm not swimming in the $1,000 waters. It goes to like the can you but should you. Like I can, but I've decided for myself that I really shouldn't be doing that. So this was a lot of money for me to spend on a card. And I say this is a hard one to talk about because between then, so March of 2022 and now, one of the other two have sold, and it sold on eBay for $2,700. And so I've very recently been having like a little bit of a hard time thinking that I should post this on eBay, and if someone else is interested in spending that much money for it, that I should let them have it, and if they don't, then great, because that's a 3x.
And it's always, I'm sure for you, it's I could go get this and this and this. If
I could get so much for it, right?
And maybe go back and buy one of these because they're out of 50 at some point.
Yeah. Well, no, out of 10.
Or out of 10. My bad.
But still.
So they're 50. Okay. Yep.
Yeah, out of 10, pop 3 in a PSA 10. But there's going to be raw run, and it's one of those things that, like, not to say that there's another person who would spend that kind of money on it, right? Who knows? But that's the sort of thing with me where it's like, to your point, there's a lot of Kevin Nash cards I could buy. There's a lot of Frank Thomas cards I could buy, Sean Kemp cards. There are things, I could buy a lot of any of those and still spend that money outside of cards, a good amount of money outside of cards. And so it comes to there's not a perfect philosophy, right? But a philosophy to have is, would you buy the card at that much money? Mm-hmm. Well, I wouldn't pay close to $2,700 for this card. Like I told you, it was kind of hard for me to pay almost $800 for the card, right? And so that's one of the things that I think about, and I'm always kind of thinking about for my collection. And for this one specifically, it's on my Mount Rushmore. It's a huge card to me, but for the cost, it becomes a conversation. So I haven't posted it. It's not on eBay right now, but it is one of those things that you might see it on eBay coming up. And I do that with some of my cards where I'm into it so cheap, or my personal value of it is significantly less than what I think the market value might be. And I'll put it on eBay and I'll put it at a very high price, because I normally, I would want the option to reject an offer, but that there might be a collector out there who wants it more than me. And my collection, like we've talked about, is wide enough that there's just so many other things that would mean a lot to me that I could spend that money on.
It's interesting to me too. I've learning through this podcast how, again, I look at you and your page, obviously a huge Geordie collector, or I talked to Joey, the e-trader. And it's interesting, some of these collectors like him, for example, and like you're mentioning here, where you have to be, how do I put this? Like you're really deliberate in how you're orchestrating this collection because, right. Some people obviously have the mindset of anything I buy, I keep forever. There's no selling ever. Right. But then on the flip side, there's other people who have tried to, right, acquire a collection of really, really rare, hard to find cards. And sometimes that does require that give and take, like you're kind of giving here, where, like for Joey, I remember, like I said, talking about to him, it was, sometimes he does have to pull out these cards that he's had for a long time, got for a lot less, because in these trades or in these, to sell and then go buy, that's where he can get these cards that otherwise he never had the opportunity for. So appreciate you sharing that. Because again, not a topic that I think people are always comfortable talking about, but I think it's a topic that needs to be talked about because it's obviously we all think through some of these things.
Yeah, it's one of those things to me. I mean, not to beat it like a dead horse or anything, but if you're in this for the long haul, which I am, I really enjoy collecting. Like I hope to be collecting for another 50 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
Think about your monthly burn rate, multiply it by 12. Okay, how many years, and then how many years are you going to be in it? So is that amount of money, for some people that's going to be tens of thousands of dollars. For others, I mean, that number might be millions of dollars. And is that a number that you're okay with spending on your hobby instead of something else? And if the answer is no, well, then you have two ways, right? You can decrease that burn, or you can be reinvesting the money that you've already spent. So that's $1 million, but it's not a net new $1 million, right? Some of it's money that you spent previously that you're putting back into it. And that's kind of the big picture thing that I keep kind of working through, right? Because there's no right answer. Even for an individual, there's no right answer, right? It's just a constant kind of discussion, struggle, and that's something I think that people should try and keep in mind is, what does that look like? People have other hobbies, people have family commitments, those sorts of things. Like the hobby should be fun, and ideally, it's something that you don't burn yourself out from.
Yeah, certainly. Awesome. So what's the third card we have here?
Yeah, so the third card is out of Metal Universe. It's a Frank Thomas Lynch pins here. So it's got the little pinholes in it, which you can't see on camera, but it's just a beautiful card. So what I did with my Mount Rushmore, as you can see, is, there's no two of the same player. There's no two of the same sport. With a collection as wide as mine that I like the width of, I decided it would be best to kind of pick 4 separate cards that kind of showcased that breadth of my collection. The linchpins, so it's a gorgeous card. Frank Thomas was my favorite player growing up. It was him and Cal Ripken, and Frank Thomas was like a 1, and Ripken was number 2 there. I was able to find this one. It's in a near mint 8 PSA graded slab. Great looking card. And you had mentioned pack odds before. So it was like 1 in 360 packs.
Is that's for the insert or for the player odds?
No, it's for the insert.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. So we're talking, yeah.
And
very,
I can't remember
very
how many. I can't remember how many linchpins. Let's see if it.
What's he number
10.
to? What number is he? Oh, there's 10 of them. Okay. So
Yeah,
you're talking
yeah.
3,600 packs.
3,600. Yeah, to get him right. Yeah, if you're talking about pulling the player. So favorite player growing up. It's just a gorgeous looking card. An 8, for a card that's that old, that has all the little pins on it and stuff. And when you look at this card, when you inspect it, right, like there's a back corner that like is maybe not super sharp. Like this is especially one of those, like if you're buying the card, not the grade, which I don't really care about the grade in this case. There's no reason this isn't a 9. Like it's not a 10 to me, right? But it's just a great looking card and was relatively affordable. I can't remember how much I spent on this one specifically, but it wasn't a lot of money to get into a Hall of Fame player that I love in a awesome looking set in a pretty good grade.
Awesome. Appreciate it. And this is another one where it's like, I just love hearing the pack odds. It's like little tidbits of info you can throw in your brain. Maybe you'll reference at some point. Like, I appreciate it.
Yeah.
So fourth card, what do we got here?
Last one. So I couldn't go without putting Sean Kemp, who was one of my other favorites growing up. So this is the Gold Universe. It's such a nice. I'll kind of get the shine on camera. Again, just a beautiful card. This is out of Metal Universe. So this card is in the same set that like the Platinum Portraits and the PMGs were in. So this was retail. So this is retail packs, and it's in the same set that had the Platinum Portraits and the PMGs, right? So as beautiful as it is, it's not like it's third fiddle in that, but it's just a beautiful card. It has the same thing where it's got kind of like the planets in the background. It's got that gold foil shine, which, to me, just looks great. There's obviously an incredible appeal to the red and the green PMGs, but I think that this is a better looking card than those. And obviously, the difference in price is insane. And this, I had to look it up. I knew that it was very difficult to pull, but it was 1 in 120 retail packs.
Oh, yeah.
To pull it. And again, there's 10. So Sean Kemp is number 2 of 10.
Awesome. That's really cool. And also, that's an insert specifically I don't think I've seen before. So I appreciate you sharing. It's always fun. And I always get comments when I think this will be an example of one of these podcasts where the cards are really unique. Like they're just not ones that, looking at these 4, I guess I know what linchpins is, right? But the others, I've never seen this specific card. So this is really cool. It's always a blast talking cards. Thanks so much.
Yeah, man.
So we'll end here if you don't mind. 5 quick questions. These are typically
fast 5.
Fast 5. I don't know if I made this up or what, but it's like 5 quick questions, usually like a 1-word answer, a quick, sentence answer here. So first one is your favorite year of cards, point blank.
08.
08.
It has to be. And that's not exclusively, but that's primarily Jordy. But even when you think of Rogers is there, I have some cool Rogers exquisite cards. The other players we talked about, like if I could only collect 2008, well then I'm collecting Jamal Charles, right? I'm grabbing some Forte cards. It allows me to collect Jordy rookies, which is really where I've been trying to spend my money, but would give me the ability to kind of spread out further.
Awesome. So money is no object. You just won the lottery. What's the first card you buy?
Money is no object. I probably talk to Packers Cards 87 and see what Jordy cards he has that he hasn't shown. He has a bunch of stuff. So what could I pry out of him for my millions of dollars? That's where I would go. Nothing specific, but it's coming from him probably.
Awesome. Third one here. If you had to collect another wrestler to complement Kevin Nash, who would that be?
So I have thought about this. It would probably be Scott Hall, Razor Ramon, because they were like that, and that would be like a perfect pairing, I think. And also I've looked into it a little bit, not a ton, but he is also similar to Nash, where he's not in every single set, but he's in enough sets. And you also have some scarcity now since he's passed away, as far as like autos and stuff are concerned. So I've thought about it, and if I end up doing it, it'll probably be him.
Awesome. And then fourth one here. So if you could only have and collect on-card autos or game use patches, which would you choose? What would you limit yourself to?
So this is hard actually, because Jordy has a ton of player worn and he has a ton of sticker autos. So this is something that I think about like a decent amount. I love the auto, and so I'd probably have to say the on-card auto, but it is close. And if you talk to me next year, it might be different.
And then fifth and final question, collecting wide receivers, yes or no, and why? So I'm going to guess the answer is yes, but why would you recommend it to others?
The answer is yes. I do it. Going back to fantasy football, like um, they like all these players that I collect. Like when you mention receivers, like I collect Jordy, obviously, but AJ Green, DeAndre Hopkins, Keenan Allen. Like I'm big collectors of those three, and then I've purchased a lot of others. And if you think about the ones that I still have, like they're fantasy football studs. They're the Hall of Fame, Hall of Very Good, like we've talked about before, right? And with receivers, I think you get kind of the best of both worlds, where in one situation, they tend to have long careers, and their peaks tend to be long. Whereas if you're collecting like a running back, like with Nick Chubb, right? He just like tore up his knee again, and like he might never come back. He might never be the same. It's hard to tell. So receivers, for the most part, have long peaks. You're able to watch them play for a long time, and they're able to develop over a long career. The other thing, though, is that they're not very expensive, especially if you're not grabbing the youngest, hottest wide receivers rookie card. If you wait a little bit, or if you're grabbing somebody from when you came back into sports, or from your childhood, or from when you got into fantasy football, or any of these things, right? They're very reasonable. And then just like with anything, if you have a smaller budget, there are a lot of reasonable choices that aren't their prism golds, right? So it gives you the best of both worlds there. Whereas with a running back, like they're going to be relatively cheap, but you just have that risk of their career ending before it really gets going. And then for quarterbacks, they play for long periods of time, but any quarterback that has played for any period of time is extremely expensive and makes it more difficult for your average collector to get into. And then if you're trying to get in early, I mean, you're paying exorbitant prices for people who haven't done anything. So I think receivers are that fun middle ground there.
Yeah, it seems like the league's moving that way too. Like I like what you said there, and I think the point on Nick Chubb's makes me, how do you say this? Like really, I think we all have to appreciate the eras that were running back centric, because I don't know if we'll ever see it again. Like not again. I mean, we're
100%.
talking like Barry, like probably 20, 30 years ago guys. Like I don't know if that's ever happening again. It's kind of sad to some extent.
And even if you think about, like we talked about Jamal Charles earlier, like he had a bunch of like knee issues, ACL and stuff. And you think of the career that he was still able to have after some of those injuries, and how unique that is. Even in this day and age, when people are kind of coming back more often than they used to. It's a big risk, and I'm not even talking financially, right? But just as someone who's getting invested in a player because they love them, and now you're not watching them anymore because they got cut or they're a third stringer.
And there'll always be that what if.
Yeah, like I have with Jordy. I mean, receivers aren't immune to it, but there's just less of a chance there, and they have more of a chance of extending the career when they come back.
Yeah, definitely. Awesome. Thanks so much, Jacob. This was super, super fun. Like I said, very refreshing seeing such like a different spread of cards and hearing your perspective. So I really appreciate it. Where can people find you if they have any questions and want to reach out?
Yeah, so I'm most active on Instagram at JRL Cards. I like to kind of go back and forth with people in DMs. I haven't been posting as much as I used to or want to. I have a huge stack of cards that I need to go through from mail days from the past like 6 weeks. So I'll probably have a bunch more posts coming, in coming weeks as I get caught up there. But I'm also, as you mentioned, JRL Cards on YouTube. I just posted another video not that long ago, but it had been like maybe 3 weeks between that one and the one previous to that. But I have probably 2 or 3 mail days to go through. So I'm trying to use that as an archive and show off some of the stuff that I'm getting. And like I mentioned, I try and be transparent. Part of the goal there is so that people kind of understand as I post all these cards that I think are really cool on Instagram, like I'm spending what I consider to be a lot of money on those cards. But then there's some cards that I'm buying that look very cool that I'm spending like barely anything on. And so I'm hopeful that people who watch that can see like, oh, like maybe this is a way that I can take my collection if I'm trying to do it on a budget. And then, it's very easy to look at somebody's collection and think like that should be me. And maybe, but also consider how much money they're spending and are you okay with that and how that would impact your life. Try and be responsible. I want collectors around for a long time. Like Austin, like I hope that we're talking on whatever platform, decades from now about our collections.
whatever, what do you call it? Like metaverse stuff. Yeah.
Yeah,
Like
exactly.
something like
Yeah.
that. Yeah. Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Jacob. Have a good rest of your week. Thanks for hopping
Yeah,
on.
you too, man.